over and over again. God chose me to pour out His blessing, to pour out His grace. There's nothing left for me to do than to lift my hands and pray. 'Cause over and over again, thank you, Lord. Over and over again, day after day after day. Over and over again. God chose me to love for all eternity, to love forevermore. My heart is so unworthy, so I bow before you, Lord. Over and over again. I'm grateful, Lord, that you chose me. Over and over again. Despite of all the things that I've done, yeah. Over and over again. God chose me to pour out His blessing. Your mercy endures forever. Yeah. To pour out His grace. Thank you, Lord. There's nothing left for me. But lift my hands and pray. Just want to give you the praise, God. Over and over again. 'Cause over and over again. Good evening, my free sisters. Have you enjoyed this week? I truly hope you have, because I know I have been tremendously blessed. We started this morning with Pastor Maureen Hamblin, and oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think around the world, all of us women had a very cleansing cry this morning as we talked about being enough, about how God has not left us as orphans, how we are precious and loved in the sight of God. Oh, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm so excited that we're continuing it this afternoon. But first, let's open with a word of prayer. Oh, Heavenly Father, we are so full. We are so full of everything that we have received this week from all the women who have shared, who have poured themselves out with such honesty and transparency and vulnerability. Lord, we are so grateful for our sisters who have given of their all for us. And we ask that as we are going into the rest of this day, our last day in Freedom Week 2020, that you will give us room for more. Because, Lord, there is more coming. I know that you have poured your spirit on Dr. Walton and Pastor Purple. And so I ask, Lord, that you will give us a heart to receive what you have for us so that we can be free and free indeed. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, Dr. Walton is our bonus speaker. When we originally were putting together Freedom Week, we had 14 speakers, and then Dr. Walton came, and it's like, we have to include we have to include Dr. Walton, in part because we realized that we did not have someone who was speaking to the disabled experience. And we wanted Freedom Week to be inclusive of all women, all their experiences. And so we needed that voice at the table. So Dr. Walton is here at Bonus. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Walton is a Washington, D.C. native, an award winning speaker, an author, an advocate, and a board member of Respectability, a nonprofit organization fighting stigmas and advancing opportunities for people with disabilities. She has dedicated a significant amount of her time to fight for diversity causes, especially within the disabled community, and with a focus on women of color. Walton earned her bachelor's degree in 1979 from American University, a master's degree in 1985 in adult education from Syracuse University, and in 2005, a doctoral degree in counseling from George Washington University. Walton became an amputee at the age of 18 due to osteogenic sarcoma, a potentially fatal form of bone cancer, and initially struggled to accept and adjust to the loss of her leg. Acceptance took her some time. 10 years passed before she wore a dress again, when she finally realized that one leg was not the sum of who she was. She emphasized that while acceptance personally took her 10 years, it comes whenever one's ready. There's no magic number. Her success gave her more confidence and led her to the conclusion that her disability was not negative at all. Walton recounts the experiences that led to her acceptance and reinvention in her novel, Shattered Dreams, Broken Pieces. She contends that her history as an activist and her book is her proudest achievement. Walton is also the founder of the Divas with Disabilities Project. She founded the project in 2012. It began with women with disabilities connecting with the topic and meeting other women like themselves, said Walton. The project strives to reshape the perception of what a disability looks like by promoting women of color through an array of media platforms. Divas with Disability works toward this goal by providing opportunities that increase the participation of Black and Brown women with disabilities in mass media industries. Divas with Disability started as a small Facebook group but has grown into a national movement with more than 2,000 members and supporters. In the future, Walton hopes that the project can develop a global message, hire staff, and eventually become a formidable nonprofit organization that is able to serve Black and Brown women and girls of color all over the world. And we are so excited to have Dr. Walton with us today to tell us more about what's a leg got to do with it, living out loud with a disability. Dr. Walton.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you so much for having me here. This is a blessing. And I'm so glad that God has given you the wisdom and the sort of light to put this on. So thank you very much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Oh, okay, we seem to have a little bit of a feedback there. Dr. Walt, okay, I think we've got that sorted out though. And yes, Dr. Walton, you can go ahead with your presentation. I'm not sure what that feedback was. Sorry about that, but you can go ahead.
So I hear someone else speaking, so I'm not really sure if you're speaking to me, but anyway, was
Um,
there a question that you asked me? I'm sorry, I apologize because I'm hearing two sounds now. I'm sorry.
yes, I'm hearing that as well, and I'm not quite sure where that's coming from.
Yes, I
Hmm.
hear it as well, but everyone else is in mute. So I'm not sure why that's happening.
I wonder, let's see where it's um
Might you have a Facebook page open that's playing that in the background, maybe?
So yeah, I just checked to see if anything was going, and I don't hear it anymore. So it could have been something that was going on, but it's I don't
Ah,
hear it. I don't hear it anymore. So
okay, excellent. So yeah, so
can
you can go
you
ahead with
hear
your
me now?
presentation. Yes, we can hear you. So you can go ahead with your presentation, and then we'll talk about what you shared and do a little interview right afterwards.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll start with who I am. My name is Donna Walton, and I have a interesting walk with life, and I want to share that with you. So it all began in 1976 when, on a cold, frigid day, I stepped upon a metro bus and my leg cracked in half. And that was the beginning, I should say, of my journey of understanding who I was and understanding life, in fact, was going to provide or not provide for me as a Black woman with a disability. When I first lost my leg, I didn't have a real good relationship with the term disability. I thought that it was something that was going to impair me for the rest of my life. Uh, I grew up in a very a household where my mom at the time was Pentecostal, and her faith, it was her faith and her belief in God to know that my life would not be different, but that it would actually be better. But at the time, she didn't really see that. She really thought that it was God's plan for me to keep a leg, a diseased leg. But that was not God's plan. God's plan was to have me live a vivacious, spiritually driven life, a purpose, a life on purpose. So that I would actually transcend my disability, that my leg wouldn't have anything to do with my life. It was a very dangerous cancer, osteogenic sarcoma, and the chances of me living were very, very slim. So the fact that I'm here speaking today, I have to give all praises to God, because it was never the plan for me to leave this earth. It was my plan to serve as a testament, a testimony. My dream was always to be a performer. And that sort of got derailed, I would say, or it was redirected. So I had not lost that faith and that passion to be a performer. I still perform. I use the world as my classroom, and um, it's my stage, I should say, and the world is my audience. And so now I use living with one leg, showing and testifying what it is to stay on purpose, how to deal with adversity, and so transform all of these things, my imagination, my passion, to be a performer into an organization. And I skipped a lot because in the middle, it was all about staying on purpose, getting the learning, getting the knowledge, getting the education about my life, because this was going to be a whole totally new experience. I had to shift from thinking that it was all about the body, that it to knowing it was really all about what the internal self would be. So getting all the education, getting, I would say, all of my tools, getting my energy, getting my food, my nutrient, I come to where I am today as a Black woman with, I like to say, who happens to live with one leg and is defined as a woman with a disability. Hold that title proudly, because disability is not a negative. It absolutely has power, because there's power in knowing what you are, and you want society to know what you are. So I've taken all of that, all of what God has given me, all of the lessons, all the bumps and the hurdles, and transformed it into my passion and to create this organization called the Divas with Disabilities Project. And as Danielle mentioned, the Divas with Disabilities Project is a phenomenal nonprofit organization that's aimed to amplify the images and reshape what disability looks like, using Black women, Black and brown women, and young girls to show that it's not about what you have. It's not the disability, if you will, but it's actually the ability. It's about what you basically show up and in your space, standing proudly, standing boldly, and whatever body you have, and showing the world that you have the capacity to transcend the disability. So we use our platform to show society what disability looks like, and to show with mass media, that we need to be a part of that. We need to have our stories told. We need to show what it is to live out loud, to live confidently, and to know that our bodies are just not just a detail of our life. And so that's a part of where the story is. We're on a mission, we're on a movement, I should say, to transcend what disability looks like, and to educate, to inform, to raise awareness, so that Black women, brown women, with disabilities, having to live in different bodies, can really absolutely live their life on purpose, because that's what it's about, on purpose. And so I'm here today to hopefully share and to inspire and to invoke conversation around what does it mean to live at the intersection of being Black, female, and disabled. And I'm just, again, so grateful to be here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk about this. Divas with disabilities. How did the idea of you being the voice for this movement come about?
That's a great question. Actually, it started as a Facebook group page, and I felt that there had to be other stories out there, because there wasn't really a community that I really had around disability. And so I just was, I thought that if I wanted to talk about what is it like to date, and are there any other women that are experiencing these same lived experiences? And it grew from that. And then from that interest, I saw that there was something bigger. We all had we shared similar stories, and that is our stories were not being told. Our images were not being reflected. Particularly in film, in advertising. We are consumers. We're a part of the whole, complex part of life, but yet we were not seeing ourselves. And self-esteem and self-efficacy and who you are has a lot to do with what you see and what perceptions people have of you. So the Divas with Disabilities Project was sort of born out of that notion that if we're going to be, if we want to be seen, then we have to be the change we want to see. And then the term diva came about because we saw ourselves knowing that diva and disability could coexist in a single person. We wanted to show society that because you won't think of diva when you think of disability, because disability has such a negative connotation. So we wanted to flip it on its head. We wanted to flip the script. So we could show that if we could, and even if diva sometimes has a negative connotation, whereas it's not the finger snapping, sassy individual that we're trying to portray. However, that is a lived experience of women. And so therefore it can also be a lived experience of a Black woman who happens to live with a disability. We wanted to show that there's an intersection, that we don't separate ourselves from being Black women. And as you know, Black women are not monolithic. We show up in all kinds of patterns, all shapes, sizes, colors, and lived experiences. And so that's how sort of divas came about. And as I said, it wasn't incorporated into a nonprofit organization until 2017. At that point, we incorporated and decided that there need to be initiatives and programs. So we do mentoring. We have a global diva ambassador program that works out of Africa right now. We have 4 countries in Africa. We call them global diva ambassadors, who work on behalf of educating and promoting the mission of divas in these countries, and mentoring young girls, bringing them along. Because only through empowerment, only through when you know thyself, if you will, then you can absolutely help others. And we need examples. And we want to debunk myths and theories. And it just doesn't exist in America, in the US. So that's how the Global Divas Ambassadors program. And through COVID, the advent of COVID has brought about some other programs that we do. We support divas in the areas of food support service, delivery services, because as there's a lot of barriers to women with mobility disabilities, chronic illnesses getting out in the grocery stores is at risk, and so we support them in that areas. We have a LinkedIn program that we serve them so that they can find jobs, and many divas are underemployed or unemployed or need accommodations. And so finding new employment really helps in that way. And then of course we help them with a Zoom subscription so that they can advocate and mentor other young women through Zoom who don't own their own account. Because as you know, the basic Zoom account doesn't allow you to connect with many individuals, and it's a short period of time. So by paying for the pro account, if you will, we're able to have divas have a larger network and reach more people.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So what would you say, since starting the group, what would you say what's the word I want? Accomplishments. What would you say you've seen change because of the group?
I would say what has seen change is the movement itself, the number of people and followers. It lets you know that you're not on this journey alone, that there are other women who have these stories, and having that support network. That has been the real glue that has shown that this is an effective program, that it's working, because the followers, because women are just reaching out from all over the world, wanting this connection, believing in the mission. I have the same sort of interest in seeing, yeah, you're right. When I turn on television, I don't see myself. And, we want to be represented. We don't want to be erased from American history, from American culture, because we have to serve as that example. Society, well, first of all, it's God's purpose, and I think that that's been another thing. Those women who are following all have a Christian base. They know that they're on purpose as well. That they're not ashamed of their disabilities. We all believe, and I hope that I can speak honestly for many of our members, that we all believe, or many of us believe, that we're in these bodies for a reason, for a purpose. We really, I mean, no one wakes up to say, you know what, I want to be a one-legged. I didn't wake up saying I want to be a one-legged girl. That wasn't something I prayed for every night. However, it is ordained. I really think it is on purpose that I'm supposed to be that way, because it is through this life in these bodies that we're able to reshape, remold, and sort of reinvent the whole idea of beauty. We're really letting beauty look a different way. We show women with catheters, stringing down their legs, or women with, various discolorations of their body, facial deformities, which just showing beauty in its best. So we're all on purpose. God didn't give us this to keep it quiet. And so we all believe that we have to talk about it. We have to advocate. It's like right now, I don't know what else to do. It's like, what else would I do? I mean, I've gotten all the education. I have a master's in adult education. I have the degrees. Yeah, I got all of that. But it's at the end of the day, it's how do I help some young girl know that their life is worthy, that they have much to offer, that they are lovable, that they can couple, they can marry. We want to, it's kind of really unfortunate that women with disabilities are perceived as unlovable, as not sexual, not sexy. We want to change that. God's purpose is for us to have a life as well, vibrant and spirited. And so that's what we're here to do. That, Divas has many, many reasons to exist. My life has many, many reasons to exist. I couldn't, I can't even imagine not, like I said, doing this work. I don't know what else to do. If I couldn't do
Wow.
this, I don't know what else to do. I mean, I've transformed all of my spiritual gifts, if you will. I think this is the spiritual gift. My spiritual gift is to tell the story. I wrote Shattered Dreams, Broken Pieces, a journey of faith, resilience, and reinvention as a testimony. I mean, I'm asked, why did you write the book? It's a testimony. It's just a testimony. I know that when God saved my life from osteogenic sarcoma over 40 years ago, that I was not going to be able to be silent. It would be an abomination, I felt, to be silent about that miracle. That was a miracle because statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here.
Wow.
God had to change all of that. So, and I'm grateful for that every day.
Wow.
That's what I'm
Wow.
saying. This platform for you to have like I said, been blessed and to be given that spirit to know that disability had to be talked about. That's a blessing. And the way that you and I connected to know
Yes.
in the mid hours of the morning, right? And I'm like, so some things just can't, they have to happen. I use the word ordained. They're ordained. They gotta go. They got to happen.
It's true. Well, I'll tell the story real quick, at least from my side, about how this connection happened. We had one speaking spot left on the speaking roster that hadn't been filled yet. And as I was looking through the list, okay, we've got married, we've got single, we've got this, because it really was my intention to be as inclusive as possible. We've got LGBT, we've got all this, and suddenly the Holy Spirit was like, you don't have disability. And I was like, oh my goodness, we don't. And that's necessary. That is a part of, the Black woman experience. And I started, combing through my friends list. Okay, who do I know? Who do? And I cannot remember what plugged into the search, but an article about you popped up and you were working on this project where you were in not a movie, it was actually like a television series, I think.
A web series, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me reach out to her. And when I inbox you, one, I didn't know if you would see my message, because sometimes if you're not Facebook friends, the message doesn't go to your inbox. It can be months, years before somebody sees the message. It goes to the other inbox. I don't know if you would see it. And even if you did see it, I knew nothing about you other than what was in the article. So I didn't know if you were a Christian, I knew nothing. But eventually you did see the message, you reached back out. I think I sent you the message like 1, 2 in the morning. It was super late.
Yeah.
Or very early, depending how you look at it. Yes. And you reach back out. Yes. So you can kind of see it whenever you're ready. And you reach back out and you had a conversation. Oh yes, this is the one. This is absolutely the one. First, let's talk about the project that you're working on right now, and the role you're playing as an actress with a disability.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So that came about just miraculously. But it was ordained. So Nuance Entertainment, 2 young women, powerful Black young women, Ashley Denise and Ripley Lene, have a production company in New York, and they were producing a web series called The Retreat. And they were reaching out to find a Black woman, actress, who could play the role as Pamela Harrison. And Pamela Harrison is a character who is an artist, a writer, to be specific, and she has a disability. They wrote this character to have a disability. So right from the beginning, that production company was speaking to the mission of Divas, to show authenticity, right, in media representation by showing disability. So they put out this casting call, and they found me through Respectability because I serve, on the board, a board advisor actually. And so they went through Respectability, and it got to Divas. So it came into Divas platform, and they put it out what they're looking for, and I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. Now I wasn't looking for myself to play this role. I put it out to all the rest of the divas. I said, okay, this is our opportunity to show up in Hollywood. Let's go for it, And I put it out there, and they certainly did interview. I mean, audition some of the divas, but they didn't cut it. And so they came back to me and they said, well, are you going to submit your reel? Are you going to submit your information? I'm like, well, I didn't think so. It's in New York. I just really don't think I could get to New York. And they said, well, how about if we came to DC and auditioned you? Well, how can you say no? No, of course. So I show up, I auditioned, and didn't think I really did that well. Like, oh, no. Well, 2 days later, they called and said, we'd like to offer you the role as Pamela Harrison. And it was phenomenal. So it took place over the filming took place over the whole summer, the summer of 2019. And it aired in 2020 of April. It's an 8-week web series, 8-episode, I should say, web series. All Black women cast and crew. It's a phenomenal series, and I encourage the viewers to take a look at it. It can be found on YouTube, just a retweet. And it was an opportunity not only to sort of ignite the passion in me to be an actress, but also to show the representation of story and how we can be represented, that disability is a lived experience, and that a role can be played. So when we're talking about casting and including people, why not include a person with a disability? Because as you have done here, you're part of all of this. There's an intersection of being Black and female, and we can play a role. A judge, a nurse, I mean, whatever, just name a role, and a person with a disability can certainly be a part of that.
Absolutely. Now, I'm curious because speaking from the entertainment perspective, I know that there has been some discussion in the industry about the discrimination against those of disabilities, particularly in the context of children and how disability is marketed to children. So very often in children's films, those who are villains will be portrayed as having some sort of disability, be it a limp or some sort of facial abnormality. There's something wrong with them physically that is your cue. There's something wrong with them, emotionally or what have you. What are some of the things that those in the disabled community are doing to change that perspective?
Well, that's a good question as well. So collectively, first of all, the casting of villains and all the negative perceptions about disability has been historical. There's only like 2% of people with disabilities in film, and those be individuals who are even playing those roles. I mean, or persons that are playing with disabled roles are not disabled, right? So we're trying to shift that whole paradigm. The disability community is trying to shift that paradigm first and foremost by actually going out and trying out for these roles, auditioning for these roles. That's one of the things. It becomes a challenge because many persons with disability are not getting into the schools. I mean, there's a barrier there of being educated in your craft.
Right.
So because of lack of access, okay, for one, things are not accessible. So that's one of the things. So we're working with schools. I know the Divas with Disabilities Project is sort of creating a pipeline for qualified actors with disabilities to be auditioned. Um, Industry wise, Hollywood is making some changes. It's going to be slow, but it is happening. They've created, and you may have sort of heard about it. They've created this sort of I don't want to call it a rider, but I guess it's their diversity and inclusion uh, I mean, not program, but what can I say? Their I don't know. This is called a checklist
Initiative.
initiative, or whereby, or standard, whereby they have to meet a certain criteria in order
Mm.
for roles to be given the green light to get an award.
Mm.
So you just, moving forward, I think 2022, and I could be wrong, but it's not. It's going to be a couple of years before a person, a film can be nominated for an Oscar, for example. It has to meet a certain criteria, and in terms of diversity and inclusion, and one of those criteria, of course,
Oh.
has to be disability. There has to be some if either a leader or someone who led the project, wrote the project, performed in the project. It's probably just various ways, and I think that that's a start. I mean, certainly there's much more that can be done, but the disability community is certainly always either I wouldn't say protesting, but certainly making sure that we're at the table at least, when
Mm.
initiatives or when roles are being talked about, that we're at the table. Respectability is one organization that I know is definitely ensuring. They have a Hollywood initiative that they're working to make sure, working with casting directors and producers and showrunners as such, and doing a toolkit to show, if you really want to show up, have someone with a disability in your films, well, this is here's what you can do. Here's some things you can do, right? One of the major things that casting agencies and Hollywood in general can do is make their places accessible. Make
Mm.
the places where they want a person to audition accessible, right in the story, so that it includes a person with a disability. But that takes a lot of effort as well, because we have to be at the table. I always believe that we can't really make change unless at least we got to be in the room. Then we got to get to the table.
I
So
like that.
hiring, employment, and not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera. And I try to emphasize that with divas. It's great to be an actress. Absolutely, I'm down for it because that's my thing. But I think if we could be directors, we could aspire to be directors and producers and showrunners, we would have a more impact, because now we'll
Mm.
be in a decision making role. And so that's going to be very significant. Being in a decision making role, being at the table, being able to make decisions on what film gets the green light,
Mhm. Mhm.
and ensuring that people with disabilities are there.
That's fascinating. What would you say to those who are struggling with invisible disabilities? Because very often we think of disability as something like you can look at a person and you can tell, oh, this person is disabled. But those who do not have visible disabilities, from what I'm understanding, they struggle because they don't get some of the same concessions that those with visible disabilities do. What would
That
you
is very
say
true.
to people who are struggling with that?
Well, one of the things I could say, in terms of society's perception of what is disabled, that's where it
Mhm.
begins. It's that whole perception
Mhm.
of what is disabled. What is disabled? And that's what we have to start there with, changing and shifting the paradigm, shifting the perception of what it is. That some disabilities you may not see. And so
Mhm.
that's where being accepting the human comes in. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
The second thing is, um, people have to self-disclose. And I know that's not
Mhm.
always a comfortable thing. But if I don't know, I don't know what I don't know. And so I
Mhm.
need to tell you, because even I struggle with that. I walk this really sort of duality in life. I have this thing. On one side, I'm an amputee, yeah, and if you don't see this leg, you got it. However, on the other side, I wear a prosthetic. I wear an artificial leg, and if I walked into a room with that artificial leg, you have no idea that I'm an amputee. So it's really incumbent upon me. If you're not going to accommodate, I can't expect you to accommodate me. You should, because you should be making things universally designed so that everybody gets access. But that's not always the case. And so people
Right.
with who have invisible disabilities may sometimes have to share that information. For example, persons who have psychiatric disabilities may not show those. I consider those sometimes episodic conditions because they may not always show up. So you don't wait till it shows up if you have bipolar. You don't want to wait till you have a manic, a manic episode, if you will, and now you want to disclose. I think that the conversation should happen prior, with your manager, with your friends, to say, sometimes this is what my life looks like. It doesn't always look like this. So when I show up, I just like to be respected on the basis of some days my days may not be good, or I may behave like this, but I am still very capable. But I just may need grace that day. I just may need
Gotcha.
grace. And I think that's important, that we just all need to practice grace.
And I'm glad you brought the word up because it kind of brings me to my next question about disabilities within the faith-based community. How does that show up, and how can the faith-based community be better about addressing and including disability?
Well, that's a great question as well. You're asking some really great questions, because I think we have to begin with conversation and conversation, and then next with inclusion. So again, the more you see, the more it normalizes or authenticates an experience. So the faith-based community, it's again not any different. We need to stop separating life in these compartments, so that everyone is doing something differently. No, we're all doing the same thing. We're including, we're having friends, who may be different. We need to embrace more, be more have more acceptance. We need to educate ourselves. We need to reduce the fear around difference, around disability. I think the church could have more, or the faith-based community should have more lessons, more education, more stories, more persons to present, more ministries, if you will. Why not have a disability ministry? We have disability support groups all the time, disability advocacy groups. How does that match? I think the church is a microcosm of society, or should be, just as the workplace is. So everything should be reflective of what's on the outside. So if you're building these ministries, why not build a disability ministry? So that disability ministry could be those advisors, if you will, could be that, and they could have their own programs. They can have their own newsletters. I mean, the information has to be infused in the same way that other programs are being infused. That's the only way we sort of get beyond the label, if you will. And it
That makes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I don't think everything always has to be prescribed or ascribed to the title. And I'm working with that too. And I don't have the answer for that on this program or this conversation. Like, how do we do that? But I do think we somewhat just kind of enact, just be proactive. So if we want to have a program, I don't think we always have to say this is a disabled program. I think that we could have a program and include people who happen to have a disability, but not because they have a disability, because it's a human experience and you want diversity. So, you aim for that. Make that your goal.
And what about the spiritual perspective? Because I've read articles shared by those who are disabled who kind of echo something you said at the beginning of your presentation, that when you first got ill, there was an assumption that healing meant the leg would be saved. And
Absolutely.
within the faith-based community, often there's this assumption that healing, that wholeness, means you will be quote unquote normal. So how can we shift the perspective within the spiritual community that there can be wholeness even if the body isn't the way that we conventionally know it, or even healing doesn't manifest the way we think it should?
Well, that's a God-based thing. And I think that the
Yeah.
pastors, I think the ministries really have to take that lead to really teach about God.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we taught God, if we really taught about Jesus Christ, we would understand about wholeness. We would understand disability quite easily, just as we would
Mm-hmm.
understand those who are LGBTQI. This is all whole. This is a wholeness kind of thing. We're not on these
Mm-hmm.
separate bands of living when it comes to God. We're
Mm-hmm.
all one. And that's the way I perceive this thing. Because again, um, everyone has a responsibility to love, to honor, respect, and to treat someone the way you would want to be treated. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that that requires a lot of exercise, if you will. It's not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
you don't really have to do much on that. If you really believe, if we're talking about the Jesus Christ that I know, and the God that saved my life, I don't think we need to talk about this. It's not that complicated. I think we try to create these complexities about what do we have to do. Like, you do as if you would do it for your for your congregation. What else would you do? You
Well,
really.
as we look at our country, there does seem to be a divide about who we see God to be, and there does seem to be this. I agree with you. I agree with you that if we look at the life and character of Jesus, Jesus was about healing. Jesus was about feeding. Jesus was about caring and supporting. And yet we have a country right now where a large percentage of the faith community does not see that side of Jesus. So, when you say that if you know the Jesus that I know, tell us about the Jesus that you know
Well,
in
the
the
Jesus that I know
context
is,
of, yeah.
yeah. I mean, the Jesus that I know is a
Mm-hmm.
miracle. Is a miracle maker. You know, it's truly about believing in things and trusting. We're talking about
Mhm.
when we talk about faith based. We throw that term around, but do we understand faith? Because that's the Jesus I know that imbued me with understanding that what I may not see doesn't mean it's not happening, and that I have to
Mhm.
really live my life for the transformation. I live my life every day because I know I believe in God, and I know that my faith will lead me to the light, will lead me to a better. And I don't want to use better versus, because I don't believe that my life by myself, by my not having two legs, makes my life any less than your life because you have two legs.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
I have one leg, makes my life any better that you have two legs. You know,
Mhm.
this is it's an individual walk, and I would never proclaim to be able to talk about it from a global perspective. I can talk about it from an individual perspective and hope that it reverberates out
Mhm.
to say, well, wow, if she believed in that and the
Mhm.
statistics were against her, and she's where she is today, there must be something to this thing. I think that's
Mhm.
why it's important to testify, if you will, to have a testimony. You
Mhm.
can't sit on your miracles, you can't sit on your blessings, being
Mhm.
favored. And that's another thing about being favored. When we understand that, you know it's like, to whom much is given, much is required. To I can't do anything else but give it back. I got to tell
Mm,
the story because that's the only way you get God's message out. We're all
mm,
storytellers of God's miracles. I'm one of
mm.
God's miracles, and I got to tell you about that. And so,
Wonderful.
yeah, that's how that comes through me.
Wonderful. So if you were speaking to someone who had only recently become disabled and is still learning how to live this new life and this in this new world with a new body or what have you, what would you tell them that would encourage them for their journey?
That's a good question as well, because again, the first thing I would always say to someone, which wasn't really always said to me because I was 18 years old, and as I said, my mom, and at the time, and congregation parishioner, they believed in the leg. They thought that
Mm,
the leg, that God healing the leg would be the glory. My life would be,
mm,
yay, I'm a, pick up your staff and get up out of here. You can walk, girl. That was their thing. That's all they cared about. Jesus, save that child's leg. Don't let her lose her leg. And
mm,
so the first thing I would tell someone is that your internal self, that you're going to have to build a fortress internally. And that internal self is your spiritual self. You're going to
mm,
have to be concrete. And what that looks like, that means you're going to have to screen out the noise
mm,
because there's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a
mm,
lot coming at you. Society's perception that that you don't look good, that you're not good enough, all of that. So the first thing you're going to have to do is build yourself an internal fortress that things just bounce off, that you're going to walk through it. You're going to walk through fire because that's what I know that's what I did. It was very, very tough. I mean, because my whole notion of what life was and for a girl had to be
mm,
absolutely flipped around. I was socialized to think that I was a bag of chips and some because I had a good shape and I was cute and I could wear these cute clothes and all that stuff, all the external things.
mm,
That's where I was. So I had to, like I said, I had to shift, and therefore that would be the first thing, to build an
mm.
internal fortress so that
Fortress, okay.
you can stand strong because you're gonna need to be, like, I think God talks about this belt, just wearing this belt around you, a shield, you know because you're gonna need it. And once you
Wow.
get that, no one will be able to knock you down. I mean, and then the second, is the internal messages. Again, internal
Mm,
messages, because self-talk, as I call it, and that self-talk is
mm,
a combination of God's talk to you
mm.
and you reinforcing that.
Right. Wow. I mean, those are tips that can apply to all of us, truly. All of us, as we've been discussing this past week, have really struggled with that inner talk, that sense that I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, I haven't been given enough. So yes, the internal fortitude and then the internal voice, that is very powerful. Dr. Walton, I want to thank you so much for being with us, for sharing with us. I know there are a lot of people who were blessed, and I thank you so much. Was there anything you want to share before we close this part?
I just want to share. I always use this quote out of my book, and it's to give you the fortitude and energy to go forward. Because when one door is closed, you have to know another will open. And that
Mm,
is, if what you want is not behind door number one, door number two, or door number three, knock a hole in the wall and make a new door,
mm,
because that's where we are right now. That's where I am, and I think that those words, that that quote can be very powerful,
Yeah.
because there are going to be opportunities that are not going to be, you're going to think they're not for you, and they probably are not. But but never stop and never ever give up.
I
So thank
love
you.
it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Danielle. Really
Thank you
grateful
for
to you.
being with us.
You're more than
And,
welcome.
and Dr. Walton, when she was telling me she's trying to come, we were looking at the time, but because she had a race that she was doing today. I think it was a 5Ks that you were doing
Yeah,
today.
well, actually, I'm doing a cycling. We're doing a amputee cycling clinic. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
yes.
So yeah,
So,
we were really glad the timing worked out so you could be here. And yes, for those who did not know, those who are disabled can do all those things as well.
absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Well, thank you very much. And, look forward to speaking with you again. And I hope you have a wonderful
Absolutely.
platform the rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, Dr.
Take
Walton.
care. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Okay, so we're going to go to our intermission at the moment. We want to remind you that Girls Gab coming up, to be here for that, because this is where our speakers, all of them, but some of them are going to come back, and we're going to have a wonderful time together, chatting and answering some questions. So the Girl Gab is coming up. You want to be here for, and then you want to hang tight because we have Pastor Tabitha Purple coming to speak with us next. And oh my goodness, the wait will indeed be worth it. So hang tight. We will be right back with Pastor Tabitha.
Over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. God chose me to pour out His blessing, to pour out His grace. There's nothing left for me to do than to lift my hands in praise. 'Cause over and over again, thank you, Lord. Over and over again, day after day after day, over and over again. God chose me to love for all eternity, to love forevermore. My heart is so unworthy, so I bow before you, Lord. I'm grateful, Lord, that you chose me over and over again. In spite of all the things that I've done, yeah, over and over again. There's nothing left for me. But lift my hands and pray. Just want to give you the praise, God. Over and over again. 'Cause over and over again. Over and over again. Yeah. God chose me. Yes, He did. God chose me. Over and over and over again. Yes, You did. God chose me. He extended of Your love amazes me. God chose me. My heart is overwhelmed. My heart is overwhelmed. God chose me. When I was not, my Lord's pardon. God chose me. That's when You chose me. That's when You chose me. You chose to pursue me. God chose me. I love You, Lord. So I love You, Lord. God chose me.
And we're back, ladies. And we're back. Our next presenter is Pastor Tabitha Purple. Tabitha is a British born pastor working in the Netherlands. She has Caribbean roots. Her mom is from Barbados, like my own, and her stepdad is Jamaican. But she grew up in the heart of London and loves the big city to this day. Tabitha has had a varied career with degrees in business and education. bef- it's business education. Before taking up the call to ministry and obtaining a degree in pastoral theology, she worked in marketing, teaching, and communications. Known for her creativity and passion for justice, she has a first love for youth ministry. She has been writing for many years, with her first essay published in Brown Eyes, an anthology of Black and Brown women's perspectives on the world. Tabitha is currently in production for her show, The Dark Side, where she discusses justice, life, and society from a slightly different angle, the dark side. She is also working on the development of inclusion and belonging training for churches looking at race, gender, and disability discrimination. Without any further ado, ladies, the very next voice you're going to hear is our very own Pastor Tabitha Purple.
Hello, I hope I've done this correctly. Let me do this. Is my mic working? Yes. Hi, I hope I'm with you. Excellent. Thank you for just letting me know that you're there. I appreciate you. This is going to be totally unusual for me because I think this is my first live sermon. Most of them have been pre-recorded on Zoom, so this is the first one. Thank you, Danielle, for the baptism of fire. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Danielle for giving me the call and trusting me to do this particular topic. I will be honest and say that you set the bar really high, sister. Like, it's super up there, and all of us are just swimming up and meeting you at the top. Every evening I've heard these amazing women do these talks with topics that I've heard each and every one say, wow, Danielle, you really gave us the hard-hitting topic. And then came the wait is worth it. And when you originally floated this idea to me, when you originally said, hey, can you do this? I was like, you know, the other topic that you were thinking of, I'll do that one. Like, I'll do that one, not this one. And you're like, no, this is definitely the one. And I thought, there's two things about this topic that completely scare me. One, are you saying that like the wait through the week was worth it to get to my talk? Oh man, we're in trouble. Like, oh no. And then the other one was, there was an implication that I waited for something, I got it, and it was amazing. Like, it was definitely worth it. And I was like, do you know a secret about my life that I don't know yet? We kind of need to have a conversation, girl. Like, we need to have a talk about that, because I was like, wow, that's a really heavy topic. So the first thing I want to do is to say a word of prayer. And then I'm going to tell you some stories. And I hope that the answers will come during that to this very heavy topic. Let us pray. Almighty God, thank you so much that you have blessed us to be free, to be a part of this Freedom Week, to be here at this moment and this time, to be blessed with your presence, with your goodness, with your kindness, to have your Spirit pour out in front of us so that we can be vessels for you, that we can live a free life. As I begin to share some of these stories, Lord, I ask that you will bless each woman that hears these stories. May her heart feel free. May she run toward you closer and closer. And with every step she takes, may her freedom really become part of her joy, her peace, and may it overflow like a river unto other women. Help me, Lord, to stay with you and in your word. In Jesus' name, amen. So I have some questions for you today. My first question is, when we talk about the wait is worth it, what are we waiting for? That was the first question I had when I saw that topic. And I thought, well, but what exactly are we waiting for? And I know that a lot of conversations I have with women are about waiting for the man, waiting for the baby, waiting for the kids to grow up and leave the house, waiting till they get the perfect body, waiting till the job comes along, waiting till they graduate and are where they are. And all the time, I have this idea that we're waiting for this magical thing outside of ourselves that's going to be the fulfillment of who we are. And to me, there seems to be a disconnection between those two things. So I had questions about what we are waiting for. Then I thought, well, is it worth it? What is it? What does it mean to wait? When I say wait for something, well, what's involved with waiting? And you see, in the English, we have a multi-usage word here, because the vast majority of dictionaries will tell you that waiting is to just stand still, do nothing until the thing comes to you. But in Hebrew, when we look at that word, it has a totally different meaning. And so I wanted to read a few scriptures to see if you could guess what that meaning is. So it says, the Lord is good to those who wait for him, for the soul who seeks him. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage and wait for the Lord. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles, and they shall run. Did you notice something about those verses? There's about like 140 times in the Hebrew Bible that the word wait or waited is used. And in every single one of those times, there's an expectation that when you wait, you're actually doing something. And there's a correlation here, because when you wait, when you actually take time to wait on the Lord, in the English, you could say somebody is waiting on you. So you go to a restaurant, you sit down, there's service happening, and we say, oh, the waiter is coming to you. But that waiter is a busy person. They are somebody who is working hard. They're in the background trying to figure out which table needs service next, who needs to be spoken to. And in the Hebrew, it's the same. There is an active participle. Did you notice? You will mount up on wings like eagles. Well, if you're not doing anything, where are you going? Which eagle's wings are you getting on? It says you will run and not get weary in some texts. Well, how can you run and not get weary if you're waiting and you're supposed to be stationary? There is a challenge there for our understanding of what it means to wait. And so there's an expectation in the Hebrew, in the narratives that we're reading, that when we're waiting, we are active, we are serving, we are doing something. But I still have a question about what are we waiting for? What is the focus of our waiting? So I want to tell you 3 Bible stories that you probably know very well. Anyone who knows me knows I love a good Bible story. So I want to tell you this first story. This first story is about 5 sisters. And I love this story because these are 5 women who have gone through a lot. Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They've gone through a great deal. They have lost family members, and they are about to lose their very home, the land that they live on, because of a rule that says that girls cannot inherit land. And they are waiting to be redeemed. What does waiting look like for these women? Well, these women go straight to the head. They go to Moses and they demand an audience with God. They demand to speak to Moses and say, your rule isn't fair. We will lose everything. Our family will lose everything that we are working, we are busy with, if you don't stand up and allow us to inherit the land. And so their waiting for their land has an action. It has a moment of faith. It has a purpose and a direction which they have to go. And the law of Israel is forever changed by these 5 amazing women, these sisters who stood shoulder to shoulder, demanded an audience with Moses and said, the law is unfair. God honors those women, and all 5 names are recorded, which if anyone's ever read the Bible before, you know is a miracle. Women's names are like gold dust in the Bible. But these 5 women's names are recorded and the law is changed. Because while waiting, and what we see as waiting as inaction, they saw very much as getting up and going forward and honoring and pursuing God. The next story I want to tell you is about a little girl who grew up. And she had dreams like most of us have. She wanted to get married and have children and have a business and be rich. I can understand her dreams. Well, just the rich one. The married and kids wasn't my thing. But she wanted what little girls wanted. And she did. She got the life she desired. She got the husband, and he was a good human. He was actually a good man. She got the children, and she managed to raise them, and they were honorable children. They actually honored their mother and their father. They did the biblical thing. They honored God and they worshiped. She had money and she had land and she had businesses and she had everything. And then one night, unbeknown to her, her life would change dramatically. Everything would stop in an instant. The business was gone, burnt to the ground. The children had been taken back. God had, it was all finished. And when she turned to see the love of her life, in her grief, in her anguish, in her pain, having waited, having done all that she was supposed to, he was sick. He was unknown sick. He was not able to be helped. There was nothing she could do. There was something she could do. It is to reach out to God. Because if your focus was on God, you would come back to him and say, Lord, Lord, what have you done? But in her anguish and in her pain, in her grief, we record Job's wife unfairly. Men have preached sermons on her about the ungrateful woman and this and that, but that is not who she is. She is a grieving mother. She is a wife who cannot help her husband. She is a woman who has suffered loss. And when she comes to the point, she says, I can't do any more. There's nothing I can do to help you. Curse God and die. Just let's give up on this. The question becomes, what was she waiting for? Her identity wasn't in all of those things that she had acquired. It was in God. But in that painful moment, she lost sight of who God wanted her to be. And that is where we get this wonderful story of Job's wife. And we forget and overlook that Job's wife goes on a journey too. She is mourning and grieving and going through this process of learning her identity in God until God restores her at the end of that text. And you see, sometimes we don't realize, we think, oh, well, Job got everything back. But we don't talk about his wife whose life was restored to her, who had new children again, who was able to go forward in her life. Her life too was restored. What are you waiting for is the question. There's a story that I particularly have a love-hate relationship, and it's the final story I want to tell you before we talk a bit more about what we are waiting for. It is a story of a woman who has been preached far too often by men. I say this frequently. Sometimes men don't have the insights into women they think they have. So when they preach about our characters, they interpret us in very interesting and creative ways, just like Job's wife. But with this particular woman, it has been preached on many times before. Hannah is this person that we'd like to tell the final biblical story of. Hannah is a story that we know. Women know this story. Women feel this story deep in their hearts. Hannah's story is one that touches us in our souls in deep places that we don't always have the words to express, because Hannah's story is one that resonates with us in ways that we're not sure why. But Hannah's story teaches us something about what are you waiting for? What does it mean to faithfully wait on the Lord? Because Hannah has a good life. Hannah is married to a man who adores her. There are many women who would want that thing, but she's married to a man who adores her, who would give her anything. But like many women, she is seeking for something other than what she has in her hand. And what she is seeking for is vindication. She has a sister in her life who is tearing her down, who is breaking her soul, and who is making her feel awful. And nothing anyone else can do can break that self-talk. Nothing anyone can say can change what she is hearing within her, because what she is hearing within her is that she is broken and that she is flawed, and this person's laughter is ringing in their ears. How many of us have had that experience? We know the theory that God saves us and loves us as individuals, but we can't get out of our heads the negativity that someone else has put there. We can't get out of our heads the self-doubt, the talk, the laughter, the criticism, those points that hurt in ways that make us feel broken. And it says that Hannah is challenged by her husband. Am I not enough for you? Do I not love you enough? And Hannah's response is something spectacular. She doesn't disrespect him or tell him to get lost. She quietly goes to the temple and she weeps to God. Some of us know those tears that Hannah has cried. We have cried those tears in our pain for the things that people have done to us, for the pain that they have caused us, for the hurt that has been in their soul. We have been on the receiving end of the anger, the bitterness, the hatred of someone else. We have been harmed in ways that only God knows those tears. When we sit in the temple and we cry, we don't have anything left to utter than those tears. And there is a man that sees her from a long way off, and as is the custom of men, they see women and they misunderstand what is happening. There is a woman who is in agony. Her body is probably hurting her from the tears that she is crying. She is rocking backwards and forwards. Some of you have had those tears when the sound doesn't even come out because it hurts so bad. The pain that someone else has caused you meant that your soul felt like it was being ripped in two. And there comes along a man and he says, is she drunk? And your whole interpretation of a woman in pain is she drunk? That's all you could come up with. And sometimes that's the reality of our situation, ladies. Sometimes when we're seen from the outside, people just don't know. They don't know who you are and what you've been through to know why your tears are that way. But there is a God who knows. And Hannah is there pleading with God, saying, God, I cast all of this pain before you, Lord. Everything that I am feeling, I put at your feet, Lord. And here comes a man who has to be corrected by the woman. No, sir, I am not drunk. I am not crazy. I am not overcome with anything else you want to call me. I am grieving and I am in pain and I am calling out to God. And as the man feels the weight of that correction, this woman has had to give him to correct his misunderstandings, his misinterpretation of her prayer time with God. He, I believe, feels that in his soul and says to her and blesses her, may your prayer be granted. May it be answered so that you will have relief. He knows now that there was something deep happening between her and God, and it did not need him to come in with his misunderstandings, but he knows that God is moving in her life. But is this woman prepared to do what comes next? She has made a promise to God. She has autonomously gotten up and made a decision. For those people that think that women can't get up and do, Hannah shows us that faithful women get up and they do. They do this without permission of others. They stand in the midst of people who tell them the wrong information about themselves. They correct others. They do what is right because God has empowered them to do it. She goes and she makes a deal that means that this child, if given to her, will be given back because it's not about her will, it is about God's will. What are you waiting for? Hannah is waiting for the will of God to be enacted in her life, whatever that will is, and she makes a deal that if the will of God happens in her life, she will give to God that which is his. Now, many of us know that what happens next is a miracle. We all know the difficulty that mothers and fathers have to separate themselves from their child. We know that there are people who go through the process of carrying a surrogate child or carrying a baby that they're giving up for abortion. And when it comes time to give up this child for adoption or to give up this child to the surrogate family, the pain in their heart makes that task so difficult. But here is a woman who has to wean this child. And sometimes we apply a Western word to it, and we think weaning, and we think like a year, and the baby had to go to the temple. No, he was about 7, so let's dispel that myth. You know, he was able to stand and do and tie his own shoes and do what needed to be done. But that means that her heart would have been torn, because for 7 years she would have loved this child. For 7 years she would have known that the time was coming when she had to take him to the temple. For 7 years she would have watched the temple person and known, this man is not a good father. I am really trusting my child to God. I'm doing what God wants me to do. What are we waiting for? Through each of these 3 stories, we see people who are busy waiting, but that's it, they're busy waiting. And it draws us back to the original texts, which say, what happens to those who wait on the Lord? What is it that goes on when you are waiting? When you are waiting, you are serving. And when you are serving, it's definitely worth waiting. Because what are you waiting for? Every text that's mentioned in the text in the Bible that talks about waiting is actually about waiting on the Lord, waiting on Yahweh, waiting on Adonai, waiting on Jesus. We're not waiting for the new car. We're not waiting for the great body. I'm not waiting to have children. I'm not waiting to be in a relationship with that man. I'm not waiting till I get that job. I'm not waiting till I travel to that country. I'm not waiting till I look the way I think I should. I'm waiting on the Lord. That wait is definitely worth it. Because when I'm waiting on the Lord, when I am entwined with him, when I am joined to him, when everything about me goes hand in hand with Jesus, everything about me becomes the best version of me I can be. There's a point that I went through this week where I have been journaling. And the journal asked me this question. It said, Isaiah 44 has this really beautiful text. And it says this, I am your creator. You were in my care even before you were born. Even before you were born, I was caring for you. And the author of the text says, well, isn't it wonderful that God looked through all of history, all of time? He saw you. He saw everything about you, and he was willing to come down and to live and die in this world and rise again so that you would have faith. This is what is wonderful. This is where you're like, oh, that's amazing. But I sat there going, me, with all my mess, he looked down through all of time and history, saw me, the puddle that is Tabitha, and thought, yeah, we'll do that anyway. I don't know, I'd have given that a miss if I was you. Not that great. But then the question comes, what are you waiting for? Because God did look through all of time and see you. He saw perfect, amazing, beautiful, whole you. He saw what could be. He saw all what he created in you. The world may have jaded you with all of the pain and all of the suffering, but what is in you is what God has put in you. Your beautiful whole self is in there. Just whatever you're saying it is that is causing your challenges, despite not looking the way that people want you to look, not being the way that people want you to be, not speaking the way that people want you to be, not being the right gender because girls aren't pastors, not being the right anything, because you are what? You are God's child. What are you waiting for? I can't help but think that if you are waiting on the Lord, then no matter what happens in your life, it will be worth it. Every ounce of it will be worth it because you will always have Jesus. Jesus will never leave you or forsake you. He is with you through it all. But if you are waiting on the man, then what happens? Men are complicated and slightly annoying, let's be honest. So you waiting on him and he gonna rock up with his dysfunctional self. How you gonna feel then? As beautiful and as amazing as men can be, they are also dysfunctional just like the rest of us. So what are you waiting for? If you're waiting because you want to be something, I've been working harder. When I graduate from university and when I get that job, I'm gonna be happy. And then you get the job and realize I'm just still not happy. Are you truly being who God created you to be? Are you truly stepping forward into Jesus's mission, purpose, vision of who you are? Are you in relationship? Are you in service? Are you waiting on the Lord? It strikes me that when I was given this title, I didn't know where this was going to go because I did not feel like I had waited for anything. My husband reminds me that I had waited for something. I had waited for my child-free life. Yes, I am that woman who did not want to get married or have children. When I was a little girl, I did not grow up envisioning my life with babies and husbands and things like that. I envisioned businesses and travel and fun. I had not envisioned babies and husbands. I'm still waiting for that life. Not really. So when God told me that my life would include 3 beautiful children, I'll be honest, I pushed the husband away. If you have kids, then maybe you'll be okay, was the word that came to me in my singleness. And you know what I did? I said to my then boyfriend, now husband, well, I'm not sure about that. I think that we'll just call that quits. We'll just separate. We'll go here. There are plenty of women who want babies. I'm just not one of them. I didn't want that life. It wasn't part of what I was envisioning for my life. I didn't think that was for me. And I had many, many reasons for that. Some of which included not feeling good enough. Some of which included not feeling like I was equipped enough. Mostly it included just really not thinking that this was my idea of fun. It really isn't. But mostly knowing that if God said I could do it, then I could. And that was what God envisioned my waiting time till we are united with Jesus would look like, is with these 3 amazing, special, differently abled children, with all of the color and diversity that they bring to my life, with all of the passion and energy and annoyance that they give. God envisioned my life with him being shaped by these 3 very differently abled children. And that has been a challenge for me to then walk forward and say, okay, I can do this. But I know that when I am waiting on the Lord, he is shaping my character. He is shaping who I am. I'm being the version of myself that I want to be. So what is the point of waiting? If the point of waiting is just to get what you want, what happens when you get it? Are you disappointed? Are you pleased? Are you happy? Is everything made up and you'll fight tooth and nail to make sure that it stays that way? What if you don't get what you want? What if that never happens? What if it's snatched cruelly from you like Job's wife? What if it's given freely like Hannah? What if you have to fight tooth and nail for the thing that is right? What happens then? If you are truly waiting on the Lord, if you are truly waiting on God, then everything else will be part of the life cycle of what you are doing with him. It will not be your fulfillment. You will not feel lost if you do or don't have it. You will not fall apart because your world has crumbled because you don't have this thing that you thought you should have. You will be whole because God has made you whole. I'm brought back to a point where And just to round this off, when we talk about the desires that we have, what is it that we desire? What are we actually desiring for God to do with us? You see, when we look at those early verses of the Bible, let's go back to the beginning. When we look at the Hebrew Bible, when we look at those early verses, and it talks about the desire that Eve has. She desires for wisdom. Is that a bad desire? Absolutely not. I'm not desiring something wicked. It's not a bad thing to desire to be wise. But she desires to do it in her own way, apart from God. We look at Adam when he takes the fruit from her. What does he desire in that moment? He could be desiring a life with God and a God who can fix and deal with and wisdom to do all things. Instead, he is desiring after what his wife has given him. When we look at the conclusion of those verses, that chapter where it talks about the desire for your husband, and some of us have known the pain of the desire for a man who really is not good for us, the desire of a man who is good for us, but we become dysfunctional in the relationship, to desire a man that we desire him so much that we've lost ourselves. And God is there screaming at you, wake up, sister, wake up. He's good, but he's not me. He's nice, but he ain't God. He's wonderful, but could you focus your eyes back on your prayers about me? Where is the development of you in this relationship? You don't die to the other person. What are you doing, lady? Come on. God is there calling you, asking you to come back to that relationship with him, to be there with him. Is the wait worth it? Absolutely. Being fulfilled in Jesus is absolutely worth it. You figure out things that you thought weren't possible. I never thought it was possible to be where I am today. I didn't think I'd be able to have a husband and 3 children and working as a pastor in another language. I thought all of those things were certainly impossible. But because I concentrated my efforts on being who God created me to be, I was able to do those things that seemed impossible. Things that I didn't necessarily even know I had in me to do. Places I didn't know I needed to be, I was, because God said, concentrate on who I'm developing you to be. What is it that God has placed within you, ladies? What has he put in you that he wants you, beautiful, gorgeous, energetic, intelligent, wonderful you to be? What is it that is in you that God desires for you to be? That is where your heart is. That is where your fulfillment is. That is where your waiting is. And is it worth it? Absolutely. The wait is absolutely worth it when our desire is for God, when our desires are for his way, when our desires are to follow him. That is when the wait is absolutely worth it. The wait is only worth it if you know what you are waiting for. Because if you're waiting for something other than Jesus, when Jesus comes, the amazing, wonderful one who saves you, you will still be waiting on the thing that you thought you needed and not seeing the beauty of the one who saved you right in front of you. Is the wait worth it? Absolutely. What are you waiting for? It says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Amen. Thank you, Danielle.
Amen. Oh my goodness. The wait is worth it. As a single woman, that was a word for me because, yes, I am still waiting. Oh, mercy. Well, listen, we have had a time. The speakers and I, we got together for one of our first meetings to go through the tech and stuff. We had such a wonderful time together. And we were like, we need to do this again. So we came up with this bonus feature where we're going to have a girl gap now. We have some of the speakers who are going to be coming back. We have the Freedom Week who's going to be here with us as well. We're going to answer some of the questions that were asked before, what that we didn't get to during the week. We're just going to have some girl time right now. And while we're doing it, we also still have giveaways. Our sponsors came through in a huge way. And so we have giveaways that even though we gave away stuff every day of the week, there's still plenty of stuff left. So I have every name. I hope I have every name from the whole of this week that's in here right now. You can take a peek. Everybody's name is in there. And we're going to be drawing all through the Q&A to give away everything that we still have left from our various sponsors. So if you haven't already, come on over to the Zoom site. That's where the Q&A is going to be, because it's just for us ladies. This part is just for us to have a little bit of fun together. We will see you over there in the next few minutes. Join us for Girl Gab Q&A as we close out Freedom Week 2020.